let's imagine that we have the following text file of birthday gifts. And how could we read this from a Python script? Well, let's have a look. The first thing I want to do is to add a function that reads from this file. So let's take a look at how that might look like. It might look something like this, but just having the function will not make it run. We'll have to call it from main too. So let's do that. And before we look at what we do in the function, let's try to run it. So we see that we do print the content of the file, but what did we do? Well, we created this function that takes the file name as a parameter, and using with open, we open the file that has that file name. And we say that we are going to open it to read from it, and inside this code block, the with open code block, we say that alright, for each line in that file that we opened, what we want to do is to print that line, but also to make sure that we remove the new line in the end of each line. So even if we don't see it in the end of each line, there is a new line signed so that we switch to the next line here. And then of course we call it down here in main, supplying the name of this file. But what happens if we give the wrong file name? Of course, we get an error. So let's see if we can add a try except and print a nicer message if this happens. And let's try it again. We see that now we have the proper file name. Everything works as it should. If we now give it a file name that is wrong, we should get our error message instead. And in this case, we have hard-coded our file name, so there is no need to ask the user to input another one because we have hard-coded it. But we have the try except here to handle it and print this message, letting the user know what went wrong. But okay, now we can read from the file. What if we want to append a new line to the file? How would that look? Well, let's write a function for that next. And we see it looks very similar to what we did when we read the file, but does it work? Well, let's try it. So let's imagine that we want to add this as a wish or as a gift to our file. So we call this function that we just created, and let's see if it works. And we see, well, it was added here, and now if we commented it out and run our script again, we will see that yes, it reads all the lines, including the new one that we added. So what did we do here in the append file function? Well, we supplied a file name, much like we did in the previous one, but also the text that we want written to the file. And when we open it, we make sure to open it using the append mode, meaning that we will not overwrite what is there, we will just append to the end of the file. And then we use write to write our wish, and we must not forget to add a new line character so that we make sure to switch to the next line. And as we're using with open, the file is automatically closed for us by Python in both these cases. So we don't have to worry about closing the files. There is one more thing that we can try, and that is to just write to the file, so not append to it. So let's create another function here. And let's take a look at the code before we run it. So we can see that the write file function is very similar to the previous one that we wrote. The difference is that we are not using append mode, instead we're using write mode. Other than that, these two functions look the same. And we also added a call to our new function where we use the same file and we want the same message as we had when we appended. But let's try to run it and see what happens. And we can see we first read the file and outputted everything that we had in it. That was from the read file here. But then something happened. When we're using write, we overwrite everything in the file. So now instead of adding to the end of the file, this is everything that's in the file after we have written to the file using the write mode. One other thing to note here is that we can keep the rest of the code, in this case writing and reading from our files, quite clean if we have our error handling in main. So if something goes wrong, we will catch that here in main, and then we don't have to have the error handling in each of our functions. So these becomes much easier to read.